Hello and welcome to Forecast. I'm Alice Sharp. I'm the artistic director of Invisible Dust, and I'm delighted to say this is our first Forecast session here at 1 o'clock on Wednesday. So thanks so much for joining us. I just wanted to start by saying a few words to introduce the programme and also to talk through my thanks to the partners that have made it possible. So just a really quick sort of run through of the partners, because they are quite amazing from all over the world. The Sydney Environment Institute, Australia, the Central Academy of Fine Arts, China, the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, USA, Jessica Sweden, Synchronicity Earth and Flourishing Diversity, UK, 32 East, Ugandan Arts Trust, the British Council, Germany, the Lieberhume Centre for Anthropocene and Biodiversity, University of York. So thank you so much for everybody, all their contributions, support, and some people are actually hosting sessions as part of Forecast. Now, what I wanted to do was to start off with, what is Forecast? Well, it's not a certainty. I think we can all tell over the last few days in England in the weather, forecasts are certainly not certain, and we've gone from bright sunshine to very freezing cold weather in a couple of days. Actually, forecasts are about uncertainty, and uncertainty is about holding a space open, a space for exchange and a space for discussion. We are faced with crises. As we all know, we've got the COVID crisis, but we've also got the climate crisis. These are international crises and they affect everyone. But in a crisis, let's not fall victim to saying there is only one solution. There's no one truth by which everyone across this planet would form. It would be a pretty boring situation if we did. So is there one answer, one path, one truth? Personally, I hope not. I hope our world, our future, our imaginations are generously enough to give life to many truths and many paths. In science, we use models to forecast, and they create a plurality of outcomes, each one changing with different factors. The importance of science with COVID has really been recognised, but it's very difficult for scientists because people want them to be definite. They want to know whether we have to have 1 metre or 2 metre difference with COVID. In reality, it's science's role to pursue several truths, which is part of being uncertain and is part of science and our scientific understanding. In economics, well, economics is famous because it leaves out of its models anything which is inconvenient or uncertain. And it calls these externalities. Actually, this is much to the detriment of our environment and the environmental modelling. And what about the technologists? Should those be involved in AI, we've got a panel later this week, be able to pursue just one path and one truth? Will this exclude people from our future? Well, I'd say yes, certainly. So what about art? We're an art and science organisation, and you knew we were going to probably, if you know us well, you'll be knowing we'll be coming on to artists. Where do artists fit with this truth and uncertainty? Artists explore the unknown as well as the known, and they build ideas and scenarios for us. They are constantly looking at many truths. This is one of the many reasons why artists are vital to exploring an uncertain future, and why Invisible Dust sees artists as absolutely integral to understanding how we're going to live with climate change. They give us their thoughts on the many paths we might take and enable us to use our imaginations to make new connections. Our keynote artist, Joan Jonas, at 6 p.m. today, so please join us for that as well as you are at this lunchtime if you're in the UK. She's exactly the type of artist that we're talking about. Her ideas on women and identity, incredible performance, and being an early pioneer of video have enabled generations of artists to look at the many truths of our world. How amazing to see her. I was so thrilled when she said yes, to be joined by a climate scientist, a global sustainability leader, and an activist model. What an experience. And actually it follows very nicely from our previous big event, Light Forecast, which was under her eye with Margaret Atwood in 2018. And we've got an all-woman panel to kick off with the keynote panel. So I'm absolutely thrilled about that. We are gathering scientists, economists, technologists, and of course artists to just create a space to discuss. Forecast is about growing our ideas, to be unsure, and where uncertainty is certainly allowed. Forecasts are like birds. They come in flocks and they wheel and they turn. At a time of COVID, when we are facing the climate emergency, how important to step back and to imagine. The world will be one like the one that we create with our ideas. And the best ideas are from sharing and collaborating, from understanding difference, which leads me nicely to Fei Jun's work, our major forecast commission. Fei Jun is internationally renowned. I first saw his work at the Chinese Pavilion at Venice Biennale in 2019 and was just absolutely blown away by the way he looks at the future and his incredible animations and ideas. And he's an associate professor at the Chinese Central Academy of Fine Arts, Beijing. He's too an artist that explores our future, and he looks at many truths, as I've been talking about earlier. And in his case, and in this commission we're about to talk about, his truths are created through new worlds. So I'd like to hand over to Lucy Wood, the Invisible Dust Associate Art and Science producer, and to Fei Jun, and I'm really looking forward to hearing them talking more about our commission. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's brilliant to be here. It feels like very many months of hard work and co-creation have come to the launch of this fantastic new artwork. So yes, as Alice says, I am the art science producer for Invisible Dust, and I worked with the brilliant Fei Jun, who I hope you can all see here before me, to create Forecasting Interesting Worlds. A bit more about the artwork. You may well have seen it already, but if you've not, it was very ambitious in its scope and scale. So we worked with 13 co-creators from across the world. We got a co-creator to represent every single continent. In total, they hailed from right across the world, from Uruguay to the Antarctica. We had a research scientist in the Antarctica. We had someone to represent our seas and oceans, who I will be talking to later. We had Russia, we had China, we had Europe, we had Finland. We had a fantastic range of people. And the idea was we asked them to select 5 objects that most influence their thinking about the future. And with these selections and their reflections on those choices, Fei Jun created an incredible interactive digital artwork, which was a world, a small universe created of the sort of future hopes and dreams of each of these 13 co-creators. And I'm delighted to be here with Fei Jun today to talk a bit more about the process and what the artwork means for us now, and what indeed it could mean in the future, and where we might go. So this is Fei Jun, Associate Professor at the China Central Academy of Fine Arts. And I wanted to start, Fei Jun, with a question, which was, how did the idea about Forecasting Interesting Worlds come about? Understanding it was sort of a development on an earlier iteration.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think it was really fortunate to have this commission from Invisible Dust. And it was such an incredible working experience, actually. I've never worked this way, I mean, in this very special period. We kind of, in some way, inventing a new method of working collaboratively. And not only collaborate with invisible dots, and also collaborate with certain peoples, which they would never be able to reach, in the past. So I think, I think at the beginning I was really thrilled about this project, the forecasting. I think in some way, yeah, artists always look at future and unknown space. That's also kind of one of my main focus in my art practice. In particular, I'm interested in a kind of a hybrid space that's in between the actual reality and the virtual reality. Yeah. And how we're using art and technology as a kind of a soft power to empower people to express, to connect. Not only connect with other people, you also connect with yourself, with natures, with the world. So I think this forecasting interesting world project really kind of gave us opportunity to test it out. So I always see this project as kind of like a field research project. They're not just what we see the result of artwork, art piece. They actually help us to observe how complex people's view are about this such an uncertain future. Of course, they also help us. Each of the participants, I think, they also be part of the creation process. They are not only have opportunity to express themselves. I think just be part of it. It's such an experience to you get a sense of how do we belong and how do we connect with each other in such a fragmented world, right? I think I'm particularly really moved about all the narratives made by all the participants.
Yeah.
When they choose all the objects, right? They really have a personal touch to a 3D model, to the items. And that's such a beautiful, beautiful things we cannot predict.
I have to say, I'm COVID and the impacts of everything. I was particularly moved, more than I expected to be, by all of the responses I got. It felt very, very vivid. And I think that liminal space between tech and the human, that this project sort of shows the bridge of what technology can do to, the fact that we could connect to people who were working in an Antarctic research station, or a grandmother in Ghana, an elder living in the northernmost part of Finland, but make it feel quite intimate and connected, was a real eye opener for me, because that sense of atomization and disparateness and disconnect, it felt like this project created a platform to bring all that together, and the intimacy of people's responses was very, vivid and moving. I shed various tears when I read some of them, and I guess that was to lead on to my sort of question I wanted to ask was, what was your response? And as you said, you found it very moving. I mean, was there a particular world or a particular answer that sort of has stayed with you in terms of an object that was chosen? If you don't have one answer, but
I mean, particularly, some of the narrative really moves me, because people have such a different view, first of all, but they're still in some way desperate kind of a period. People are really positive about the future. For example, I think one of the participants from Finland, I think, to mention how do we reuse all the resources we have. She had such a personal experience. She said, in the island, they don't build new things if there was no if old building is not torn down, right? So they have to recycle all the bricks.
Yeah, I love that concept. That's actually Eleanor, who we'll be speaking to shortly. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I mean, it's just such a, it's very, very personal, but same times, it reflects the issues we have to face globally. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, just to add the one that sort of stayed with me and certain people have said a lot as well is the watermelon and the concept of this simplicity of just reducing future to tomorrow or what you're going to have for lunch, and that connection back to them now, you know, that because we're not living in it's important to think about the future, but we need to not then totally lose the present at the same time. And I find
Exactly.
very moving about that simplicity. That I
Yeah,
think
I remember what she said. Future to me is tomorrow.
Yeah. Exactly.
So this is also very, very important attitude.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's what I was struck by was that there was a lot of hope, even the ones that sort of so Hamilton Neves from Mozambique, you know, he's had a slightly darker view in many ways about the need for gas masks because we're going to live in, you know, which is relevant now, obviously, because we all have our masks on every day. But at the same time, he brought forward the vital importance of art and how that will continue. And I think, you know, Margaret Atwood, who we had at the Under Her Eye event that I helped run back in 2018, said all writing is hopeful, or all writing is optimistic, because it imagines a future audience that will read it. And I think there's something there, because there was always an optimism there about the sheer fact that we will still be around in the future. But I think, again, it's what the opportunity of the digital to be this bridge to connect and co-create in a way that we have. I think when we began talking about it, and I was like, right, literally looking at a map of the world going, right, I need to get someone from Antarctica and someone from Russia. And, you know, I think together, and with your fantastic assistants who've helped throughout this process so vitally, Hoang and Kim, huge thanks to you, because I wouldn't have done it without you. It was sort of amazing, because you think, oh, how is that possible? But we did make those connections, and that in itself was very optimistic and hopeful. I'd just say, I mean, one thing that I was going to ask you is, if I were to put you on the spot, or if I asked you to be a co-creator and you were going to choose one item that comes to mind as particularly influential to your thinking about the future, is there anything that comes immediately to mind?
It's a good question. I'm always been kind of a facilitator in some way. Behind that's kind of one of the concepts of my creation process. But if I have to, also be making something as a co-creator, I would definitely make something positive. Because I mean, to be an artist, you have to you cannot just using artwork as a kind of a personal express of your emotions, whatever, which is important as well. But at the same time, I'm always see this project as a public art project, even though it sits in a virtual space. So I would use a very humorous approach, and to not really to entertaining people, but I mean, having a humorous attitude, which is such important skills to survive, I think, in this,
absolutely,
in this situation. Yeah. So I love those like ducks, you know, all the funny items that can make you childish.
Yeah.
Make you happy, you know. I think happy is such an important power, you know, just in to help you to cure, you know, whatever psychological problem you have. And happy is something we can really warm people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would try not to be professional artist. That's that would be my take. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just just to try to get rid of all the things I learned and really go back to childhood kind of a state.
Joyful,
Yeah,
that joyful present, and that
yeah,
is,
playful, joyful.
Yeah, because I think is it Kai Wang's, it sort of takes on a slightly dark, flippant sort of humor, which is quite hard to, it's but you get your head around it. I mean, on the note of humor, it's something that, I mean, on an aside, I've written some comedy, I'm a freelancer, so I have various hats on, and so I'm always thinking about how one can bring cute comedy humor into the climate fight, because the sort of po-faced, gloomy view is not going to get anyone on board. But also, like you said, I think the vital thing is that connection to the moment, that childish joy in things is exactly, if we don't have joy in things and humor, then what are we fighting for anyway? Just some sort of business-like humor where we all trudge into the future joylessly. So yeah, I think I mean, in terms of a lot of your work is quite playful, and obviously this was a interesting was a development upon the work that you had at the Chinese Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2018, and that was full of humor. But also, I think it's about the texture of the work, which is amazing. And I thought it might be, so if it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen and just play some of the images, because I think we can respond to them, because I was struck by just the sheer the depth and texture of the images. It's sort of, when you sort of zoom in on some of the worlds. So forgive me if this is wonky. I can never do it as seamlessly as I'd like, but here we go. Right, share. So this should be playing. Sorry, I'm going to just start the slideshow. Right, here we go. So just check it is indeed playing. Yes. So here we have the watermelons from Juliana Manu from Ghana, and this is from the Academic in Sydney.
Yeah,
but from a sort of technical point of view, like, this is an incredible, and so many of these really deep up close images. What was your experience of bringing those to life, and sort of how much work goes into that? This is me being less well versed in these things.
It's actually because this is kind of a new way of making images. We actually creating the engine first. So once we have the world built, we can immediately to see in this kind of a cinematic experience. So this really helps us, to accomplish this project in such a short time. If it's in the traditional technical process, we have to use 3D software to rendering. But this is really, thanks for the technology we can almost have a real-time interactive cinematic experience. Yeah, so of course, it's still not perfect, but you can tell from really close up the textures, and even the lighting, everything is it really adds the kind of realistic quality to the virtual world.
Absolutely. And I guess, so people watching this who are interested in your work, obviously we can share. We've linked to your various links to your work, but you work with students obviously in developing their practice on developing this sort of work particularly, or across the board in terms of what you focus with your students.
In terms of my teaching practice, we're quite broad. We basically focus on the three areas. The one is life and ecology, and the second is culture and society, and the third one is technology and aesthetics. So we're not really a technical teaching school. We don't really teach a lot of software.
Sure.
But we're more going to try to evoke critical thinkings about, what is important, what is urgent in this social environment. So, but of course, students are really afraid to using all kind of media. Yeah, it's we both have really tactile kind of a really material-based practice and a digital-based practice. They all mingle together. So I cannot really see what type of work my student is producing, because we're not really trying to limit them, try to be open as possible. But we are really care about the concept and behind the work, and also the social impact of the work. So this is something, rooted in my kind of a teaching philosophy.
Sure. Yeah, so all that theory, and I guess like so situating it in the present day, what is your sort of day-to-day now in Beijing? Are you teaching directly face-to-face, or is everything digital at the moment?
Yeah, I can give you an example of my day. Yeah, like today, I have to teach for 3 hours. We talk about post-human, talk about post-nature to a graduate student, and in the afternoon I have to go to a kind of client meetings. Yeah, I also work for client as designers. We're working on a giant government project. And in the afternoon, I was it was just really interesting. I have 3 international events today.
Wow.
4 p.m. Yeah, I was be part of a it's called a Photo 2021 festival in Melbourne, in Australia. So I was participating as artists and curators. I just finished that, and in between that and this forum, I had another meeting with a client. Yeah, we try to planning a new immersive cities actually in southern China. Yeah, then I'm part of this forum conference, but at 2 a.m. I have to be another virtual opening, which is exhibition open called "Shaping the Invisible World."
Right.
Such an interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shaping the Invisible World. Yeah, it's an exhibition held in Basel, Switzerland.
Basel, yeah.
And another exhibition. They're also showing the interesting world actually on
great,
site.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna join their virtual opening. So I mean, just one of the example of my one day shows how globalized we are.
Well, I bet you are a digital man of mystery that clearly has an international man of mystery who clearly doesn't have any need to sleep. I don't think a bed would be an object that you take into your future.
I do. I do a lot of sleeping taxi, yes. So I have to cross 4 different time zones in one day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I have to say, doing this project with you, I started to become a little bit maternal and was a bit concerned about your lack of sleep because the hours that you were putting in. But you obviously are made of stronger stuff than me, perhaps.
But it's such an exciting life. I mean, to be part of kind of a process. Of course, we still need to sleep. Yes,
you do. Well, good. Well, I hope you got some over the new year as well. But I guess that would be my question for me. We've got a few more minutes left. Is how do you feel your practice has changed and the culture of sort of creativity in China, or your own sort of immediate in the face of COVID? Have you blossomed with it and benefited from it? I mean, for example, would our collaboration have happened pre-COVID? We might not have thought in those ways. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear what impact it's had on your practice and the way that you work, if it has.
It does, but to be honest, at the beginning of the COVID situation, I was quite desperate. because I feel like artists almost can do nothing to change the situation. Yeah. But later I realized, of course, I cannot cure the disease, but there are more damages in people's emotional space than the actual physical illness.
Yeah.
So I'm start to actually, prior to this project, actually I did another project for all the kids has to stay at home.
Mm-hmm.
I teach them how to use this tool to build temporary hospitals for people, right?
Oh, nice.
That
Yeah.
also actually, yeah, also inspired me how art can be a tool to get people involved,
Yeah.
to empower people to release their anxieties, to express their optimistics about future. So, I mean, that has really changed me, and also in some way helped me to open another space. It's how do we situate art making in a social social environment, especially in this kind of crisis period. Yeah, I mean, that's important transformation for me as well. We really see art as a social tool, really see art as a social interface to connect, to engage people's that become, I think that become more emphasized well, in my future practice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's both enabled connections because people are all working remotely in a way that hadn't before, but the vital importance of art and the catharsis and the expression of it in a time when our mental health is so impacted is more important than ever. And so on that note, we'd love to bring in our first co-creator, who is Laura Tenenbaum, who very gainfully is calling us. I think it's about 5 a.m. in California. Is that right, Laura?
Hi.
Hi, Laura.
So
nice to see you.
So indeed, well, we know Laura very well for the Rubber Ducks and other such things. But Laura, would you mind just saying a very few words about your background?
So my degree's in oceanography. I taught college level oceanography for about 13 years. Then I worked at NASA on climate change for a decade. And when the last American president was in office, I was censored and stripped of my duties and barred from speaking to the press. And then finally I was forced out of NASA.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But I was, honored, thrilled, excited to be asked to participate in this project. So it felt like something good and meaningful to co-create. So thank you for that.
Oh, well, it's great to work with you. And if anyone watching, if you Google Laura Tenenbaum and Time magazine, you'll get a great article she's written all about the Trump era censorship and what the future of communication around science and climate science is, which is more important than ever. So thank you for that, Laura. So yeah, I guess what was your experience of sort of being asked this question, and how easy was it for you to sort of hone in? And has it changed the way you look at objects now or the future in any way?
So, again, I was thrilled to be asked to participate because it feels great to be able to, tell my story and communicate and share globally. So that's fabulous. It's a little bittersweet having to do it remote because it's wonderful to be in person with people, but that's been, for a whole year, that's been the case. As far as picking the items, I think I just went with what kind of touched my soul the most, my first instinct. Certain things like I used satellite, and I kind of felt like, okay, for somebody who worked at NASA for a decade, I'm basically required to pick satellite. I think it's interesting how everybody got so excited about the rubber duck one. You know, that was your favorite. I thought about this. My husband, who works, he's an actor, and he'd worked on a Barbie doll commercial, and he brought me a Barbie doll because I asked him to, and basically for the same reason as the rubber duck. It just reminds me of what's real, because we usually think that we're real and all these plastic ducks and Barbie dolls are fake, but the truth is that they're going to be in the environment for a million years, and a million years no one will even remember my name.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's it. The concept of future archaeology and future fossils, you know, they'll still be around, and we'll be but a layer of sediment somewhere, won't we? That will be
trash will be a layer. Yeah.
But yeah, it's that concept of yeah, and I guess, you know, I think as humans we're drawn to sort of what is cute and sort of, you know, there's something just pleasing about a rubber duck, because it's a just completely simplified version of nature that's sort of childish and infantilized maybe, but yeah, I mean, in terms of being part of this, what was it feeling like, of sort of imagining yourself with all these different co-creators, and what was it like to see the final artwork?
Certainly it was, you know, exciting to see how it came out, because you know, you're over here on your own in your remote part of the world, as far as you know, writing. So in addition to the visuals, all the co-creators were asked to write like a paragraph or two about each of the items. And, you know, I'm a writer, so I think it's kind of fun, engaging, exciting to see the written art, because that's my art, merge together with the visual art, merge together with all these other people and their take on it. So it does feel global and participatory. This is not the first time I've been asked to forecast the future. And I think it's funny how usually, and I noticed this in your conversation earlier, this idea of positive or negative, and people ask, you know, is it going to be this hellscape apocalypse, or is it going to be this shiny, squeaky, new, beautiful future? And I always say yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I don't really, I mean, why do we have to have either?
Yeah.
Because that's what we have right now. We have both right now. And, you know, the future, as you said, is tomorrow. The future is in the next 5 minutes. I just wanted to say one other thing, talking about the duck. I think the first object I picked on the list was the shining stone. And it's in great contrast, I think, to the duck, because a stone is not plastic or artificial at all. And it's the kind of thing I think that people overlook. And my point with the stone is that everybody, when they were a little kid, everybody I've talked to liked rocks and picked up rocks. Yeah. And, you know, some people loved rocks. I still love rocks and have a rock. In fact, here, right next to me, like there's rocks, just things that you love. And I think when we start to pull away from loving fake materialistic crap and remember what it's like to love the simple, ordinary, natural things, then, you know, we'll be able to change how we relate and how we connect to the planet.
I mean, 100%. I mean, a classic example is, not that I'm going to pan out to the chaos that is my son's playroom type thing, but you've got all this plastic that he sort of necessarily accumulates. Obviously, I only take secondhand, I should add, toys. But the thing he's only interested in is a stick that he's, you know, sticky stick that he talks to, and a little bit of, you know, his little collection of pebbles. And it's just so elemental. Literally, it is of the elements, simple. And we have a whole capitalist machine saying, look at this shiny thing you'll need, and then you buy for your kid and they'll use it for 2 weeks and that'll be it. And then it'll go into landfill. So yeah, a huge cultural shift in where we put value in terms of the things around us, and that we don't need to make more things. We have all the things we need if we just stopped. I wanted to say for a few more minutes, because you've mentioned the hamburger thing, because I felt like you should talk about insects and hamburgers, if you don't mind, because it was an interesting.
Yes. So one of the struggles, so I picked 4 things and then I had to pick a 5th, and I wanted the 5th thing to be some kind of insect or bug, because when I think of the future, I think there's going to there's going to be a lot of bugs. My background is climate science. Bugs love warm, humid weather. And we're in store, even if we stop burning fossil fuels in the next 10 seconds, we're in, it's cooked into our environment to have a lot more humidity and a lot more heat from the carbon pollution that we've already created. So we're going to have lots and lots and lots of bugs. And so here's a big bug right here.
Oh, hi.
I knew they'd photobomb me at some point.
Of course.
Anyway, I was looking, how do I work bugs in? Because there was no bugs in the choices. And I thought, oh, of course, we're going to be eating bugs. We should be eating bugs. They're a protein source. And so I kind of worked it into hamburger. So hamburgers are, even now we have artificial meat, but I think the hamburgers of the future will include like cricket burgers.
100%. Yeah, I'm certain of it. And you can keep them up sort of in any angle. You don't need just a bit of field. They can just be everywhere at the same time, which is good use of space, I guess. But yeah, well, I wonder whether, Fei, I was going to say, well, obviously we're looking at the images now. Fei, was there anything you wanted to ask Laura, or shall we bring Eleanor in at this point?
Your microphone's off.
Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. First of all, I was so lucky to have you to be one of the co-creators. Yeah. I'm always love to work with people, and also just curious about how do you think art as a part of your lifestyle? Yeah, have you ever thought about that? Because people always think making art is a professional skill, but I see it in a different way. How art can be just be part of your lifestyle in the future.
Sure, I love this question. So this is literally what I'm working on right now. I'm writing this now. I'm going to submit it to Scientific American, I think. I think that we are forced, maybe starting as children in school, to silo and make a choice between different things. And I've kind of completely reject that. One of my struggles in the world of science is like you have to pick between. And I remember sitting in meetings, whether it be in grad school or when I was a college professor or certainly at NASA, thinking, why do we have to be so uptight? Why can't we be who we are? And I'm a dancer, I'm a trapeze artist, I'm a writer, and I want to be my whole self, not separate self into other things. So I want to create in a world where we get to be whole.
Yeah, I mean the model of how, for example, I'm sure it's the same in the States in some way. The model, the paradigm of teaching has changed so much when I was growing up. You were taught by a teacher who also had a sideline in being a specialist in bears or played the flute, and they would bring their specialism to the classroom because you could do that because you brought every part of you. And now it's like this highly siloed, highly controlled, data-driven format. And obviously, it's an obvious thing for us to say, but as an art science organization, we're exactly about sort of exploding those silos, bringing it all together. But we're a specialist organization creating that platform, but it's more a paradigm for how we exist as people. It's, when you're in the cocktail party, people say, oh, what do you do? I find myself asking people that question and then I'm horrified that it's come out of my mouth because I'm so conditioned to think that it's still there. So it's that opening up of how we define other people. On that note of other people, it mustn't be too late in bringing in Eleanor Church. Now, if you could put on your video, Eleanor, it'd be lovely to have you join the conversation.
Hi,
Eleanor.
Hi, Eleanor.
Hi, Laura.
So Eleanor, as you may know, if you know the artwork, obviously I know Fei certainly does. We wanted someone to represent the seas and oceans because Eleanor took part in the female-only amazing expedition, which goes across the seas and oceans, doing I think it's once a year, isn't it, with a particular focus. So I think the one you did was plastic, but Could you tell us a bit more about you and sort of how you came to be here? Well, beyond me emailing you, but just your background.
Yeah, no, actually all the expeditions are about plastic and how they impact on us, and especially as women. So I'm a documentary filmmaker and photographer, and a lot of the work I've done over the years has focused on the environment and how we as people exist within the environment, how it impacts on us and how we impact on it. And so this was, and yeah, like as Lucy said, a couple of years ago, I was part of an all-women expedition that went across the North Pacific from Hawaii to Vancouver. It took 3 weeks, and we were a whole host of professions. There were scientists, teachers, policymakers, recycling experts, artists, and me, a filmmaker, looking at microplastics in the North Pacific Gyre, which is 3 times the size of France, and it's the densest accumulation of ocean plastic in the world. And I'm just finishing a feature-length documentary about it. So yeah,
which we'd love to see make happen. So yeah, I mean, it was brilliant to have you involved in this. And I guess, yeah, I mean, to sort of, without trying to repeat myself, like, what was your experience of, faced with the blank page, right? 5 objects, how easy, how instinctual was it, or did it take quite a lot of sort of wrangling to get to that point?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks obviously for asking me to be part of it, because it was so exciting when I got your message about it, because it felt like a really important moment in time to be stopping and having a think about this, because a lot of the work that I do is thinking about all the things that we do wrong and all the things that we could do better. But this felt like a nice space to dream of something that could happen, whether it does or not. And when I first got the list through, actually, I found it my mind drew a bit of a blank. I thought, I don't know where to go with this. So I gave it some space and came back to it. And I really appreciated making the space to really think about it. And it was a real opportunity for me to pick out objects and think about things that I've looked at in my work in the past, or projects I've done, or places I've been to, or people I've met, and to bring in those different things that I've learned that aren't working but could work so differently into our new imagined future. So it was a really wonderful experience, actually. So things that I've worked on in the past, and things that I brought into the elements, were things like consumption and overconsumption, and our appreciation of the materials we use, and maybe using more natural materials that could then go into the earth. And then that also followed on to food production, food security, and a circular way of living, whether it's through circular economies, circular food production, and then listening to the earth. It sounds very hippie-ish, doesn't it? Listening to the oceans and the earth, and listening rather than talking. It feels like we do to the planet rather than exist within it and amongst it and appreciate it properly. And then also overfishing. I've done lots of work on overfishing in the past, and I like the idea of looking at fish as gods rather than food, because nature has the most complex and incredible systems within it that exist, and as humans we like to think that we can always become clever and do things better and better, and maybe we do better to actually reflect. And then the rubber duck as well, because as a museum piece to reflect on just how crazy our plastic consumption is, especially, and that was particularly relevant for me, having been to one of the most remote places in the planet and being completely surrounded by so much plastic. So yeah, I loved it though. It's a great project. Thank you.
Well, that's great to have you. And yeah, I think, yeah, there's something elemental about it. And it's interesting to see where there's sort of the Venn space of overlap of certain things coming up quite regularly, like obvious things like Wi-Fi, but the concept of reusing, and the ear came up quite a lot, and that idea of listening. But I know Fei mentioned how moved he was by the concept of the book. You reference it in your book, your narrative about the brick, and about the idea of the New Albion. Is it the Albion? Sorry, I should.
It is called Albion. Yeah, I found it in a charity shop somewhere random in Kent years ago, and I picked it up and I read it, and it was just yeah, it's the idea that basically every time that someone wanted, it was a new imagined world, and every time someone needed a new house, you'd have to wait till someone was moving out of the house or didn't need it, and you'd take the bricks and one by one rebuild a new house from that. And I think it's really a beautiful concept.
It's a beautiful, and it's like that slow marching of one thing evolving into another thing, but not the endless multiplication of additional new things that we don't need. Yeah, and I mean, just imagine if that was applied suddenly to the world economic, the industrial system, house, because actually there's so much that is, it's like all of the endless tower blocks that are just basically just stacks of money across the city that are totally uninhabited, and what we could do with those if we, ideally just fill them with people that need houses, but there's so much wasted industrial sort of content everywhere.
And I think that really, I saw it as the brick and the houses, but really I saw it as just, again, like this sort of circular living in terms of everything that we use, that it gets reused and reused and reused and if it's made out of a material that can then go back into the earth, then all the better, rather than this sort of linear consumption that we continuously have in almost everything that we use.
Yeah, and I think there's something there about there's an arrogance to go, well, this thing I'm building is different, so we need to make it, rather than saying there's the humility of that kind of, we're all wanting the same thing. And I guess that's where you sort of have to be careful not to duplicate art, or when you're making new art, to make it valuable, or understand that. So this artwork is an artwork that is led by an artist and the vision of Fei, but very much is a sort of level playing field, in that we wanted to make it really feel that it was co-created, it wasn't tokenistic. We did plan, and we did hope that we'd have the capacity for people to physically make their own universes in an app, but that just basically Fei, it would require a huge injection of cash that sadly we didn't have, but we have an idea about developing this in the future for some sort of a tool that you could work on directly.
I wouldn't feel like I'd need that, because I just really enjoy the process of thinking about it and then seeing what other people have created. I didn't feel the need to do that myself. I liked the fact that Fei was taking those things and then making it out of his own interpretation of what was being said. That
it was a genuine collaboration, that you came with your ideas and your skills and your vision, and Fei brought his, and together together something is created. Fei, is there anything you'd like to say or add at this point?
First of all, I really like the narrative you wrote, and then it's such a beautiful text. It was really touching as well. And also you mentioned, as part of this kind of collaborating process, of course, I got a lot of great help from my student, my assistant, to help to reinterpret some of the narrative. I think because kind of technology barriers, right, and we don't have enough kind of bandwidth, whatever issues has caused our original plan. Because our original plan is ask each co-creators build themselves. But it turns out actually it adds another level of richness, because we have someone to reinterpret a narrative out of their mind. I think really, in some cases, it's like a happy accident in some way. And adding another level of collaborating as well, right? I really like that aspect. As Elena says, she's more into using text to express her ideas and concept. But some of the visual artists, like my student, they may not really good at writing and speaking, but they're so good at visual expressions. So that's how we kind of join together. I mean, that's also a really beautiful thing we've done.
Yeah, I think that the fact that this it's worth saying that this whole project was translated into both, obviously into Mandarin as well. And so where the art was that Venn space between the two languages, you know, and certainly it added an additional layer of complexity to the project, to say the least. But it's yeah, that sort of the democratization of what visual art can do as we move into the future. And you know, I would love a future where visual art is the common language, not English. Yeah, for sure. You know, and how we, you know, move to that, move to a world in which there is a shared, you know, visual language. And I guess it would be interesting to know how people would interact with a world if they knew neither English or Mandarin, and what their response to that world, each of the visuals of the universes might be. But I mean, we certainly had a plan with this project, didn't we, Fei, to see whether we might be able to develop it so that we have 100 worlds created from across the world and create a publication, or some sort of publication from those 100 worlds. But you know, as ever, it's the hard work of funding these things. But I think we got pretty good value for money with this project, because it was, yeah, lots of goodwill really on the behalf of everyone, and certainly the co-creators who gave so much time and thinking to it. But yeah, so I think we're going to move shortly to some Q&As. We were asked by someone on the Q&A regarding Watchback, and just to say, please go to www.invisible.com/forecast, and you can apply for a free Watchback ticket, so you'll be able to watch all the content between now and the end of Friday. You can do that, and we will send you a link to that. And anyone watching as well, there is a YouTube link which we are streaming all of this live on YouTube, and someone in the sort of helping on the back end of this can share that with everyone watching today. I guess a question for, I mean, you're talking, Laura, about a project you're doing about sort of what is art, and who am I, and how do I relate to what is artistry. Ellen has disappeared as to what I was going to ask her a question, which was what Eleanor had coming up. But I might direct that to you, Fei. You obviously have an insane amount of activity going on, but is there any particular activity going on for you that's particularly sort of forecasty, future focused at the moment, a new commission? And I'm just looking that we've got a Q&A.
Can you rephrase your question again? Sorry.
Well, you know what, actually, just you can scrub that question, because it was a bit woolly, and because we've just got something through on the Q&A, which we might as well go to now. He said, the question is, anonymous attendee, how difficult did you find it to connect creatively, given that everyone is all over the world? Well, I guess that's where the power of Zoom came into fore like never before. I guess, I mean, to briefly answer the question from a sort of producer point of view, you can only connect, yes, you can have a digital platform where you can connect people in day night, Zoom, whatever it is, but the value of building relationships is still 100% there, and without that, then no amount of high tech can bridge that gap. So you know, in terms of Invisible Dust and Fei, and your Majiti, who's your studio, you know, we connected by, you know, a lot of long conversations by Zoom before this started, right? We didn't just sort of go, bing, right, ding, we're connected, let's go. Would you say that's the case, Fei? Yeah, I mean,
that's quite innovative. I mean, in terms of how do we accomplish this project, right? Yeah, I'm doing online teaching every day. It seems to become a normal. Of course, this is good or bad. You know, it doesn't mean we don't want to go back to a physical interaction. Of course, everyone needs that. But yeah, in some way, it does actually creating a new path to creativity. Yeah. Not just for the sake of the conversations, and really, I mean, we can make tools now. I mean, as artists, I'm interested in making a creative system, creative tool, creative platform for for normal people can engage. So really lower the barriers to creativity. I think that's one thing really meaningful in our field.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, in terms of relating to, this does relate to an app which people could connect creatively through this app to create them.
Yeah.
We've got a few questions now and time's going, so I'm going to move on to the next one, if that's okay.
Sure.
Question from Lucy Springle here. I was wondering whether the environmental impacts of projects commissioned by Invisible Dust are considered during project proposals. Yeah, absolutely they are. I was just thinking about the energy footprint of large-scale digital projects where lots of people might be involved in creating objects such as just mentioned. Yes, I mean, we talked about this at length, particularly when we were thinking about going for further funds. We need to look at where I mean, obviously digital is, it is not simply, oh, it's paperless and therefore, you know, the impacts can be great in terms of servers and cloud storage. And we certainly looked at what servers we were working with to ensure we were working with carbon neutral servers. And obviously everything we do is Google, which has, they say, been carbon neutral since for quite a long time now, about 4 or 5 years. So they significantly offset any sort of cloud interactivity that they provide. So that's a significant thing. I mean, in terms of the data and sort of energy required to build on the scale that you're building, Fei, what is the impact, and you know, is it significant?
You mean impact of
so say, you know, like within, when you're building the objects, you know, and the amount of sort of data and energy required, is it significant? I mean, we did, you know, like I said, we talked about services.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it consumes more energy than a video chat, like what we do now. Yeah, it's a kind of yeah. I mean, in some way, of course, the internet does consume energies, which most of people may not really know, right? It seems like we have all the virtual activities, but they're actually also affecting the actual world as well. But that doesn't mean, you know, we're gonna skip the internet. I mean, it helps us to kind of change our perceptions about how we're going to dealing with the environment, how we're going to dealing with our relations to the nature. I mean, that's significant impact we should have. Yeah, I just like the second question. I think people asking how art can play, you know, how the art, you know, basically, you know, make people more in a positive state. I mean, it's the same thing, you know. Of course, you know, you're making art, you have to consume material stuff, right?
I mean, yeah. So but, it's to create anything is to create. Sorry, Laura, go.
Yeah, I mean, to learn how to using art as a part of your lifestyle, it's better than learn how to take a medicine.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea that one has to live a bit, but it's how you offset that. And the digital thing, I think the pitch is still evolving about how we can have the least impact. But exactly. Yeah, Laura, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I've actually thought about this question a lot, so I thought I'd just weigh in here. I think the question asks, you know, at what point are we individually responsible for our own carbon footprint as a small group working? And so my thought is that people can take responsibility for their own actions, and small groups like us, we have to take responsibility for our own actions and our contribution to the carbon footprint. But ultimately, at this point in society, people can only improve so much. We have to live, right? Kind of like you said. But what can change a lot is society. And so I think to the effect that some project like this can move the ball forward, can advance the conversation so that society can make these broad changes that are really necessary, so that we can get on like a fully electric grid, for example, so that we're not going to have this conversation about how many fossil fuels is your server burning, because we're going to have an electrified grid.
Yeah.
That has to happen in the future. So there is a trade-off. We're burning fossil fuels now with my lights on, for example, in hopes that this conversation is really going to make a difference so that my city can be completely electrified, and then we're not going to have this conversation anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's not climate change, it's system change. Climate is culture. To move culture on, unfortunately, unless we're going to gather around it, even if, well, we couldn't gather around a fire, could we? Under the moon, maybe a full moon, but that would be the only kind of carbon, free cultural experience you can have. And yes, I think the digital aspect. So thank you for that question. I think it is, but I think it is a trade-off. Just moving on to the next couple of questions before we've got about 5 minutes. Jackie Jones asked, am I right in thinking the objects were chosen from a list? Can you talk a little more about this? And what was on the list and why? Now, only Fei, can you answer that, really?
Yes, it's a good question. Actually, originally, the tool we built, we have more than 300 objects. Yeah. But we kind of simplified to 100 objects, made a list for all the participants to select. I mean, we could build more. I mean, it's just a matter of, we don't want to make it complex for people to participate. Again, I think we're not dealing with professional artists, professional builders. We try to make it as easy as possible, but at the same time, we want to actually give as much as selections to the people. But people might wondering what kind of items on the list. I mean, they're not very special. They're all kind of what I call recycled 3D models from everyday life objects. Yeah, things are around to, in your household. Yeah. So they're not like sculptures or artistic pieces. They're some are very. We try to select and provide all the items are more kind of in a general sense. They're not very culture specific. Yeah, they are kind of a symbols we are in a global sense. Everyone kind of recognize who's who, what's what. So I guess it's not really about how artistic the item is. It's about how people interpret, how people making a new context out of these objects.
Yeah, and you can't sort of have an infinite list because you simply couldn't have all the infinite models, but that hopefully there was enough that, as Laura did, you could go in a little bit laterally into it, but still could have, yeah. Okay, a few more questions to get through. Thanks for that, Fei. Eleanor, Laura, did you have a favorite object or reflection from another person's world? Any that struck you? If you can't answer this, that's fine. But were there any that came up? Oh, Laura, I think you're muted or something.
Favorite. I mean, I like all the ocean thing. I mean, it's interesting. You probably put Eleanor and I together for a reason. Our backgrounds are in oceanography, so the fish certainly. And also, I think the thing that attracted me was the groupings. If something like that's part of the reason I like the fish is they're all like a school of them. The way that they're grouped looks to me is super. Oh God.
Okay.
My dog just vomited.
Oh dear. Okay, well, you need to go. That's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah. This wouldn't happen at the Golden Globes. It probably would actually.
We need dog vomit as one of the future items.
Oh dear. Well, look, if the dog requires attention, please, we can. Should we say goodbye to you now because we don't want dog negligence to be on our mind? Or...
Well, I'm just going to mute myself and.
Okay, sure. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, I just loved. I actually looked at the visuals and then I looked at what they were representing sort of separately, and I just really loved seeing where different people's minds had taken them. That's what I loved the most.
Yeah.
So it wasn't particular objects or particular, so it's just like where, and that's the beauty of this project, is having so many different people in so many different places, really tuning into different directions. And I thought that was really so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that leads us quite seamlessly on to the final question, I think, and then we'll take this and we can wrap up, which is one open question, which was there, now it's gone, which was
sorry, I accidentally closed it.
No problem. I know what the answer was. So it was could anyone, how did you select the 13 co-creators, and could anyone apply? So basically we were on something of a tight schedule, and had we the resources, and this was a plan we were thinking about doing, some sort of open source project globally. But essentially how we did it was I sat around with basically a map of the world, thinking about all the continents, thinking about the breadth and scope of age and background that we wanted to connect to, and with a sort of a master spreadsheet. Essentially, yes, it was going with who might I know, what organization might be working in that area, or what colleague is working in that area. So, you know, the connection with Uruguay was a sort of a colleague who had a colleague of a colleague. So it was a little bit of a lateral sort of goose chase to find people and approach them. And obviously not everybody, you know, had the time or was interested. So, you know, where it was an obvious connection to find someone from, for example, China, we went through Fei and his contacts. But I'd like to say this was, you know, we might think about something that we do again more ambitiously, where we have some sort of a global open tender for people to apply. The budget for this project was absolutely tiny, despite it looking quite ambitious. So it was essentially following our little tributaries of connections and seeing where we could get that. But it wasn't just who we knew. It absolutely had to be people that we wanted, every age. We wanted to sort of have every background, not just the geographical, but the demographic sort of expanse. And yes, I mean, it was only 13 people. So because we ended up having a few for some obviously larger continents like Asia, we felt that one person to represent the whole of Asia would be really problematic. But really we needed a more ambitious one, would be one from every country, which is what 279. How many, does anyone know how many countries there are in the world? Be like the Olympic ceremony, but digitally in art. So yes, that's the answer to that question. But you know, let's ambitions to do it even more extensively. So I think we're coming to the end now. So unless anyone else wants, I would like to say yes. Please do check back onto the website, and we've got lots of events coming up today. We've got a panel discussion with Lily Cole, the author and model and activist, Joan Jonas, and some other people, the name escapes me, but an excellent panel at 6 p.m. tonight. Then we've got the world premiere of Ahilapalapa Rands, who is a fantastic filmmaker. He's doing a short film called To Stand Firm, which I think will be lovely. And we're going to be sharing Hito Stirel, who's a fantastic artist, VR experience, looking at what a future might look like in an increasingly militarized and technologized world. So that's all happening today. Please do just go to our website, invisibledust.com/forecast, or simply search hashtag forecast, and that will bring up really what you need. We're trying to put everything across all the channels, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So yeah, I think it just leaves me to someone sending something. Yes, so the next event is at 6 p.m. What is shaping how you think about the planet's future? Go to our Eventbrite or our website to get your free tickets. So it just leaves me to thank every single person who attended, and thank you, Alice, for your fantastic introduction. Whether you're watching or not, that was great. So yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I hope to see you again in the ether. Digital or not, and good luck and stay well, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for
Thank
collaborating.
you.
Thanks
everyone. Yeah.
Brilliant.